Hi everyone, Emma here, and today I'm going to be talking more about Mark Frost's The Final Dossier and just giving my thoughts and feelings about some of the chapters in his book. And today I want to talk about Annie Blackburn and Norma, who, in the secret history of Twin Peaks, we kind of were left with a bit of a conundrum about where was Annie, how was Annie, who was Annie, and there was also a lot of stuff about Norma's history being changed, and we were kind of left a bit confused about that. None of this was really addressed in the show itself in season 3. We had a brief mention of Annie, and we didn't really delve much into Norma's past. I think getting some answers in the final dossier is really satisfying. I think for Annie especially, I mean, everybody has been left with a question since season 2 of Twin Peaks. How's Annie? How's Annie? Oh, I didn't mean to laugh there. So everybody has been left with that question, how's Annie? And the fact that she wasn't in season 3, it was kind of a weird thing because she seemed like such an important character to Cooper at the time, and I don't know why the actress who played Annie didn't get invited back for season 3. That's how I heard it, that she wasn't actually invited to be part of the season rather than her refusing it. I think because David Lynch decided that Laura Dern was going to be a love interest for Cooper, that he decided that there was no place for Annie, perhaps, and maybe that's why she wasn't part of the season. But I really like that, you know, she's discussed in the final dossier. It's such an iconic question for the Twin Peaks community, so let's get into it. So I'm just going to paraphrase the story here, but basically, Norma and Annie are actually half-sisters, not full sisters like we might have originally thought. Norma's stepmother is Vivian, who is Annie's mother, and Norma maintains a relationship with Vivian for Annie's sake. Annie, at some point, is assumed to be sexually assaulted by her stepfather, and after this, she tries to kill herself. This looks like this was the reason behind her suicide attempt as we see it play out in season 2, even though that she says that it happened because of a boy. This may have been a cover-up to conceal the truth, the horrible truth about what had really happened to her. We are told that Annie, after getting out of the Black Lodge with Dale Cooper, went into a kind of catatonic state in which she was unable to speak or communicate with anybody, but every year on the same day she would suddenly say, "I'm fine." Annie was transferred to a private care facility in Spokane and has been there ever since. And on the anniversary of the day that she was found after escaping from the Black Lodge, she says the words, "I'm fine." So my first response to finding out about Annie was shock and horror. I thought, what a horrible life this poor woman has lived, this poor girl as well. When she was younger she didn't have it easy, and when she was older her life basically got snatched away from her by whatever happened to her in the Black Lodge. I think my evil Annie theory has really gone out of the window now, because it seems like from what we learn in the final dossier that Annie was a true innocent. So after thinking about it some more, I was wondering whether this was meant to be taken as a bit of a joke because of the fact that the answer is "I'm fine," when the question has been for so many years, "How's Annie?" And I don't find it particularly funny at all. I find it pretty horrific and sick that Annie is left in this situation. At the same time, I do think it's a nice way to kind of put that to rest. The fact that Annie has answered the question of every fan across the universe that has been asked for the past 25 plus years. So what's the theories on what has happened to Annie? Is she traumatized? Is she just simply traumatized by that crazy experience in the lodge? Or is something else going on? Has her soul been damaged in some way? Is part of her still stuck in the lodge? Who is she speaking to when she says "I'm fine"? Is she actually responding to the doppelganger? Is she linked to him in some way? I guess that there is some plausibility to the ideas other characters also being sort of trapped by Cooper, like Diane trapped in the lodge for all that time, and also some people speculated that Audrey might be trapped in her own consciousness by him as well. So has he just done the same thing to Annie and she has never escaped? But the description we get of Annie saying I'm fine seems to be one where she's calm, where she is relaxed. That doesn't really marry with the idea that she is responding to the doppelganger. So I really don't know what's going on with Annie. Could this really just be fiction overlapping with reality, and her response is just the response that we want to know as fans? You know, I kind of think that's a weird idea, but it's plausible, I guess. Tammy describes her eyes as being alive, as if there is something behind there. So it suggests to me that, you know, the real Annie is still sort of in there somewhere. Maybe that she is having these memories, these thoughts, these feelings, but she can't express them for some reason. And maybe she's having this inner life. It's a disturbing thought. It really is. I'm fine. It's like totally creepy. I found Norma and Annie's story to be very complex, and I wondered what the point of that was. I don't know whether Mark Frost came up with this idea of Norma and Annie being half-sisters before the show even started, and he decided to write that into the secret history of Twin Peaks as a way of confounding fans and making fans wonder about the puzzle of it all. I guess that's what he did. Otherwise, he must have aired in the secret history and then rewrote it here, but it seems like such a coherent rewrite that I doubt that is the case. I really think that this was planned, and it's a good plan, even though it asks us to re-envisage what we know about the characters in the first and second season. I think the story really fits their situation. I always thought that the age difference between Norma and Annie was distinctive, and I always thought that that was more like a half-sister relationship, being of that kind of family unit myself. I know that there can be large age differences where separate marriages are concerned between siblings, and it makes sense, although Norma's relationship with Vivian didn't come across as being anything other than a woman who was very hurt by her mother, but I guess the hurt can be viewed as being hurt of a different kind now that we know Norma's feelings about Vivian. And reading more about Wyndham Earle as well, I guess I'll stick him into this video, but reading more about what he did to Caroline and Cooper, it makes you realise how much of a horrible, manipulative monster he was, and how he must have really hurt Annie. I think reading the final dossier also makes you wonder about what actually happened to Annie when she was in the Black Lodge. We see her like fade in and out, and it's not quite known what exactly is going on with her. That would be a very interesting perspective to have explored at some point, you know, but I guess we're never going to get that. I personally, you know, feel like this is the end of Twin Peaks, unfortunately. I just feel like we have been given so many blunt answers to things, this one being an example of that, that I just think they're not going to do anymore. And if they do, then it would take a very different approach and perhaps deal with many other different situations. But we found out a lot about the characters who we knew in season 1 and season 2, and also a lot of the mysteries of season 3 have been answered in this book as well. So another person in Twin Peaks who was ended up in a psychiatric kind of unit, which is very interesting and very disturbing. It seems to be a lot of ladies, a lot of women characters who are ending up in these units. Is there any reason for this, or is this just the most logical end point for many of the characters' journey where they would end up? You know, I mean, in Audrey and Donna's case, they both visited these psychiatric units, and in Annie's case she had no choice really because she wasn't able to physically care for herself. I think maybe that you could come up with several different theories about what's happened to Annie, who she's responding to, where her soul is, where her mind is. There are so many horrific things that have happened to all these characters. Was it a result of Cooper's interference with the timeline? Was it fate? Was it the bad energy that was in Twin Peaks? I don't really think it's a nice way to have left that character, but it is an answer. it does feel like the end of a story for Annie as well, I think. So that's that. I really enjoyed reading about Annie and Norma ultimately, even though I found it quite sad, and I definitely think that if you're a Twin Peaks fan of the original show, that you will want to know this information about Annie and Norma and read it for yourself. So if you haven't got a copy of the book, I recommend it. And that's all I'm going to talk about today. Probably going to cover a few more things in the book, so I hope you can join me for those videos. So thank you for watching, and goodbye.